The death of the ostrich cases, Mr. Justice, do you have any thoughts about the case not proceeding?
Obviously, we're pleased to see the decision of the Supreme Court.
Trust the science!
Yes, a little blast from the past. They were having a bit of a fete at the farm yesterday. Maybe a little more about that later. You're watching Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Creighton. Welcome back. 1 day absence this week. It's Sunday. We're here. We've got lots to talk about. And why did I show Sean Fraser at the beginning here? Because it looks like there could be some trouble for X as a platform in this country. We'll be right back in mere moment.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Want to go to my X page here to talk about what else but X. Looks like we've got some interesting things going on here. And anyway, want to highlight my interview with Dan McTeague on Friday. It did not get the viewing it should have because the time was moved a couple of times. It was just beyond our control, beyond Dan's control. And I think a lot of people missed it. Please have a look at it. And my good friend Nico Ligon posted this the other day. Canada's on track to become just like the UK. Let's have a look at this.
Here's why the Liberals want to pass censorship and surveillance bills C2, C8, C9, C12, and C16. Here's what's happening in the UK.
How long will you give X to make sure that we can't make controversial or obscene images behind the paywall?
Well, I expect Ofcom to take its next steps in days, not weeks. The government is crystal clear. We want those images taken down. They are despicable, they are abhorrent, and we will ensure that the full force of the powers of the law that we have given Ofcom, we want to see those used. They can investigate the service, they can issue enforcement action, and if that enforcement action is not complied with, they can fine the platform £18 million or 10% of their worldwide revenue, whichever is greater. But there are also powers in the Online Safety Act which enable Ofcom to block those services being made available to people in the UK. And as I said, we would want to ensure Ofcom uses the full range of powers that it has. But we as a government are taking additional action because we are determined to ensure women and girls are as safe online as we want them to be safe in the real world. No ifs, no buts.
Online Safety Act, that should sound very familiar to Canadians. Remember Bill C-63, also known as the Online Harms Act? Although it never passed because Trudeau dissolved government last year and triggered an election, Sean Fraser has mentioned that it's coming back. Not only that, but do you remember what Carney said about social media?
American online platforms have become seas of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate in all its forms. And they're being used by criminals to harm our children. My government will act.
You might not notice about the UK, but they are arresting 12,000 people a year for online posts. And they're threatening right now to ban X because of deep fake pictures and videos. That's what's coming to Canada if Bill C2, C8, C9, C12, C16, and the new Bill C63 are passed. And how much do you want to bet that the new version of Bill C63 will require Canadians to provide government-approved ID to get access to their social media, all in the name of protecting our children, bringing the digital ID they've been dreaming about? Anytime the government says that they want to protect you, they're trying to take your rights away. Say no to any type of digital ID.
Yeah, right on, Nico. And they always start with the most reprehensible things. So it's always about safety, and it's always about children and women. It's never about the censorship, the raw, blind censorship. And of course, so Keir Starmer, the dictator of the UK, despicable individual, reprehensible individual. So he now wants Canada and Australia to join with him in banning X. Now, he's an idiot. And I am predicting, again, when the House comes back on January 26th, that is 2 weeks from tomorrow, that the Online Harms Act will be one of the first pieces of legislation the Liberal government intends to pursue. And it's going to be renamed. It won't be C-63, obviously. It's probably going to be about C-20, maybe. It's going to be the Online Safety Act, just like they have in the UK. And of course, will Canada ban X? Well, it's a risky venture because it would upset Donald Trump and, of course, Elon Musk. But only one cabinet minister in a real strange role. This is the Minister for Artificial Intelligence, Evan Solomon, the former journalist. Says deepfake sexual abuse is violence. We must protect Canadians, especially women and young people, from exploitation. Platforms and AI developers have a duty to prevent this harm. Our government is continuing to advance responsible AI, including introducing Bill C-16, the Protecting Victims Act, to amend the criminal code to include deepfakes as intimate images for the offense of publication of an intimate image without consent. We will keep Canadians safe by amending the criminal code and holding abusers accountable. Now, that's Evan Solomon all over the place, yes. But what is going on? Evan Solomon is claiming we're not going to ban X. Do you want to take his word for that? No. What's happening in Toronto today? This is incredible. Table Salt, thank you for reporting. Chaos breaks out in Toronto. Antifa rushes Canada First rally, and one member even punches a cop in the face. You know who never punched a cop in the face? Truckers, Freedom Convoy. Bent over backwards to be responsible, accommodating, and cooperative with the police, unlike these thugs on the Antifa. People are animals. So have you noticed this? The government's not talking about CO2 emissions anymore because nobody believes carbon dioxide is poison. Methane emissions are responsible for about 30% of global rise in temperatures today. Oh, methane. It's now methane. It's not CO2 anymore. We're taking action to cut those emissions because it's one of the fastest, most cost-effective ways to reduce pollution and fight climate change. Oh, get off it. Just keep changing the vocabulary. That's what's going on here. All right, so what's happening right now with Donald Trump and Venezuela? I'm going to go to a story in a minute. But here we go again. Mark Carney, of course, is trying to play both sides of the street, trying to look like the tough guy against Donald Trump. This is another psyop that it's all about getting you to think that his elbow's up again. How many times do we have to be fooled by this? Psyop straight out of the PM office, paid for by taxpayers. We are fighting Trump again, so prepare for an election soon if Carney cannot bribe more stupid MPs. Over. Canadians trust that the Prime Minister hits 50-year high under Mark Carney leadership, survey finds. Yeah. Psyop number 2 from Carney. Ezra Levant of Rebel News reported this. Brazil's authoritarian ruler says that in a recent phone call to him, Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, condemned the U.S. Operation Venezuela. Canada's embassy quickly replied, apparently confirming this allegation. And the Globe and Mail is always where these psyops are engineered. The Globe and Mail and CBC, increasingly Global News as well. opinion, we need to prepare for the possibility that the U.S. uses military coercion against Canada. So, okay, so the Globe and Mail is saying, get ready for a war with the United States. Well, that's a war we're not going to win, obviously. My goodness. I didn't know Parler was still on social media, by the way. President Trump just sent shockwaves through the global energy market. He said U.S. oil executives will invest $100 billion of their own capital to rebuild Venezuela's oil industry. No taxpayer funds, private money, American refineries. So I'm going to go to a story here. Here's what the Exxon Corporation CEO had to say about this. The only good news about this is that it's going to buy time for Alberta. If they can't start shipping all of this cheap oil north to replace Alberta's oil, Alberta has a chance to start getting a pipeline together because they're going to have to look for other markets. However, the Exxon CEO says if you look at the commercial constructs, frameworks in place in Venezuela today, it's uninvestable. Significant changes have to be made to these frameworks, the legal system. There has to be durable investment protection and change to the hydrocarbon laws. You see, they've had their assets seized by the Venezuelan government twice, first by Hugo Chavez and then by Nicolas Maduro. So you really think they want to start investing $100 billion? Drill, baby, drill does not work with $50 per barrel oil. Rigs will get dropped. Employment in the oil industry will decrease. Many executives use budgeting prices around $59 to $60, which when new drilling becomes profitable. Oil exec source. No one wants to go in there when a random effing tweet or post on X, in other words, can change the entire foreign policy of the country. Trump plans to use Venezuela's huge crude reserves to cut U.S. oil price to $50 a barrel. So that could have devastating effects. Devastating effects. And, yes. Now, would like to show you something else here. By the way, thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. It has been a very difficult weekend. Very, very difficult weekend. There, it's going to show you a bit of this. This, of course, is the scene yesterday. At Edgewood, BC, at Universal Ostrich Farms. They were honoring the life of one of the supporters who passed away. So that was nice. It looks like they were prepared for a really good time there. Wow. So I might go back to that later. I don't know. I want to get to I'm going to get to this page here. There we go. Let's have a look at this here screen. All right, and here's what I hear Keir Starmer. In talks with Canada and Australia to launch international ban on Elon Musk X. Do you think it's going to happen? Well, we'll never get a straight answer from Mark Carney, but potentially. But this is what Great Britain News is reporting. Downing Street has held talks with Canada and Australia over a potential ban on Elon Musk's social media platform X. Mr. Musk's site was drawn into controversy over concerns about its AI tool, Grok, being used to generate explicit images of women and children. And now Downing Street has been in discussions with other nations about a three-way joint response. Australia and Canada are said to share Sir Keir Starmer's worries about the deepfake issue. I always ask myself, who the hell knighted this guy? A fat bureaucrat, you know. Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, said, the fact that this tool was used so that people were using its image creation function through Grok is, I think, just completely abhorrent. It, once again, is an example of social media not showing social responsibility. Australians and indeed global citizens deserve better. Canadian Liberal MPs have so far denied their country would move to ban the platform. One, Toronto Centre MP Evan Sullivan vowed Canada is not considering a ban on X, but when I say I don't know if we can take even Solomon's word for it, it's a bit of a stretch. The UK has threatened to go further and ban X entirely under online safety legislation if Mr. Musk fails to remove a feature which allows explicit images to be made. Now, I'm going to show you another article here. This I find extremely worrisome. Because what do I think is going to happen in all right, you gotta get this. Where are we? Next on. I haven't seen it. Yeah. All right. Let us try again. Sorry for the slow response here. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. All right. All right. So Trump wants $100 billion for Venezuelan oil. Exxon boss says country uninvestable. Now, here's my prediction, folks. If Donald Trump cannot get $100 billion from the private sector, he could spend it with taxpayer funds. Now, you say, that's a lot of money, David. It's a lot of money, but you remember that the Pentagon's budget has just been upped from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. That $100 billion is chicken feed. If it means Donald Trump's plan for like a cheap oil corridor in North America, North and South America comes to fruition, will he spend taxpayer money to do this? I think he's gone too far. He's invested too much into this Venezuelan oil scheme. And don't you find it just absolutely hilarious that all they've talked about, all the Trump administration has talked about since they, the midnight invasion and the abduction of Maduro back to New York State, all they've talked about is oil. And they supposedly went there, of course, to stop the flow of drugs into the United States from Venezuela. Venezuela is not a big exporter of drugs to the United States. Colombia, Mexico, China. But of course, this really had nothing to do with the drug cartels. We know that. With narco-terrorism, all of these words that were just suddenly in vogue for a couple of days. It had nothing to do with that. It was all to do with the oil. Now, if Donald Trump is never a halfway guy, halfway measures, absolutely not. So if the oil companies are not prepared to spend $100 billion in Venezuela, Donald Trump, I predict, will take up the slack. What does this really mean? Think about this for a minute. Donald Trump, of course, famously declared that he wanted to run for president because he wanted to end foreign wars and start investing in America, in American infrastructure, America first. Well, of course, Joe Biden passed an infrastructure bill during his presidency, but 80% of that bill had nothing to do with infrastructure. It was, good old boy contracts to pay off senators and congressmen. And it was all about green energy plans that have all been dropped. So only 20% of Biden's infrastructure bill concerned real infrastructure like roads and bridges. So Donald Trump still has the perfect opportunity to fulfill his mandate, to fulfill his promises to rebuild American infrastructure, which really they haven't had a lot of money spent on American infrastructure in decades. So it is perfectly timed to do that. But here's another concern of mine, and I look at the news today, and I'm looking around the world. It's Sunday afternoon. It's about 1:30 in Ottawa, Eastern time. And I'm thinking, what kind of a week are we going to have? And I'll tell you, I'm scared because I don't know where this is going. And except it just seems to be always expanding. Now, let's have a look at this story here. This is highly worrisome. All right, this is CNN. I know, we don't trust CNN. Trump weighs potential military intervention in Iran. Well, we know that as soon as Venezuela was taken care of, Donald Trump would start thinking about going after Iran because he's concerned that the Iranians could bottle up the Strait of Hormuz and oil shipments from the Middle East could be completely stopped. Now, President Donald Trump is weighing a series of potential military options in Iran following deadly protests in the country. 2 U.S. officials told CNN as he considers following through on his recent threat to strike the Iranian regime should it use lethal force against civilians. Well, it's kind of what happened in Minnesota when the U.S. administration, the Trump administration, used lethal force against a civilian. That was a very dirty incident. I know I'm not supportive of the woman. I know she's a leftist. I know she was involved in a very woke sort of relationship. That's not the point, though. You don't just kill people because you don't like their politics. It's a very, very bad habit. And it says here, Trump was briefed in recent days on different plans for intervention. The officials told CNN as violence in the country has led to dozens of deaths and arrests. Some of the discussions have also included options that do not involve direct U.S. military force, one of the officials said. Now, where is this coming from? Let's read, go drop a little further here. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke Saturday about the ongoing protests. 2 sources familiar with the call said. The leader also discussed the situation in Syria and Gaza, they said. Now, we know Mossad agents are marching with some of these so-called civilians in Tehran. But why does Marco Rubio need to consult with Benjamin Netanyahu about U.S. policy in Iran? I mean, obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu would like to see Iran completely leveled and taken off the map. But that's probably not the smartest policy to have. And that's not what Donald Trump's going to do. But why does he need Netanyahu's advice on whether or not there are protests going on in Iran? It's none of Israel's business. And it's getting scarier because Iran has assurances from at least one nuclear power that if Israel uses nukes against Iran, Iran will counterstrike. This is all very frightening. Remember now, the war in Ukraine is far from over. Remember now that the UK and France are talking, saber rattling for war with Russia. Everywhere you look right now, there's wars and rumors of wars. Hey, sounds like the Bible, doesn't it? It really does. But that's where we are this weekend. So we got a lot of stories we'll be following throughout the week. And, I invite you to be here all week with me. I'm going to play a few clips from my interview that I did Friday with Dan McTeague. And I think it was a really, really good time.
Say to my friends who think CO2 is bad, stop exhaling. Put your money where your mouth is.
I love it. Yeah, that's precisely. Stop living. But I think if there's no movement on this pipeline, it's going to increase the likelihood of Alberta separation, Alberta independence, because Alberta will build its own pipeline through the United States. Premier Smith has already said she's examining that as a concurrent proposal. And certainly the fact that BC will balk at an Alberta pipeline will not stop them from going through the US. And if Carney sabotages the Alberta energy sector, I don't think it's going to bode well for the future of this country. And I think that's another reason Mark Carney is probably going to say, yeah, I had better bend on this one and bend fast, because events are accelerating so quickly. We live in an age where yesterday's news is out of date today. Mm-hmm. And we're moving so quickly because of 24/7 journalism. That started with CNN. People forget 40 years ago now, over 40 years ago. But with the advent of the internet, with the advent of new journalism, with the advent of constant news 24 hours a day coming from so many areas, we can't stand still anymore. And I think if Mark Carney thinks it's just going to stay the same, I think events are going to rapidly overtake him, and potentially he could lose this country in the process, because Alberta is not going to wait for Mark Carney to wake up and smell the coffee.
Nor
your final thoughts.
Nor Saskatchewan. I think a good part of BC feels the same way as well. Look, Carney hops on a plane in 4 days. He's heading to China. The first thing is not, hey, will you take off your EV tariffs or your tariffs on canola? It should be, you want to buy a pipeline? You just lost 800,000 barrels a day of heavy oil, which you desperately need for your own country. Why not buy it from Canada? And by the way, while you're at it, help finance the project. We'd be more than happy to sell to whoever wants in the world. If Canadians and El Bozos think they wanted to stick it to Donald Trump, well, then why not take the advantage of saying, here's how you do that? I'm not saying it's a smart thing. And I think allying ourselves with China is not a very bright policy on a geopolitical basis and in terms of our relationship with the free world, given the menace that China constitutes. Nevertheless, if we're going to trade and no one wants to buy our oil, we've got to find someone to buy that oil. And if we don't buy that oil, it's going to significantly decrease the receipts in revenues the federal government receives. As I mentioned earlier, if you think 138 pennies to buy US, or 139 now, so the Canadian dollar's back down again. If you think 139 pennies is a big deal, wait till it becomes 150, 155, like we saw in 1981, where the Canadian dollar was virtually worthless. We call it what it is, the peso of the North. And it'll also reflect a lower standard of living. There's so much hinging on oil and gas, and I've never been a big fan of the industry. They're not friends of mine. I have nothing to do with them. In fact, they hate my guts when I come out and I predict gas prices, because it denies them the opportunity to take advantage of people. But at the end of the day, I also recognize, we've got a healthcare system in this country. We have social programs in this country. We want to continue to be attractive, not just to pay the expectations for this generation, but for generations to come. You dump on the oil sector. You dump on on trying to find cute and trendy ways and go along with a handful of fanatics who are too busy, boarding boats and supporting Palestine, or whatever the case may be, as Greta Thunberg is doing. Everyone's walked away from this. They know it's bad. It's time for Canada, to really come measure up, get out of this business of hating our energy sector, and applaud it the way every other country does, because we don't do it for ourselves. Other countries aren't going to do it for us. And we are going to face that veritable challenge of the future of our federation.
Well, I dearly hope the Prime Minister is listening to you. I know he's not listening to this channel, but I hope he's listening to Dan McTeague as a former Liberal MP who knows what he's talking about. Every conversation with you, Dan, is not just a pleasure, it's an education. So thank you for joining me today. I always loved your work as a member, as a principled member of Parliament. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those people left today. Especially
Let's give them some courage, David. We can get back to the good old days.
But it's been a pleasure, and let's stay in touch. And you're always welcome on the show to talk about what you know, I think, better than just about anybody else. Got another clip to show you of Dan in a second here. I just wanted to say, though, you hear what this man is saying. So Canada continues to have a hate on for its fossil fuel industry. Canada continues to disparage the fossil fuel industry, and when we've got some of the largest resources in the world. I didn't realize until last week that Venezuela has the most oil resources of any country on the globe. I didn't know that. So why do you think the U.S. is in Venezuela? It's but let's listen to a little more of Dan McTeague here.
Mr. Carney has got to make a decision. It's either put up or shut up. When he goes to China, is he going to basically say we're going to decarbonize and buy more of your windmills and more of your solar panels while you continue to hit, our nation with significant tariffs on our ag sector? Or do you want to buy some oil? Because we got a pipeline. Mark Carney, can approve in a nanosecond. If he wanted tonight, he has the ability to say yes. And he can put aside some of the nonsense and obstruction that we've tolerated in this country, much to the detriment, not of boomers, they don't care, but of the next generation. Kids who can't find work in this country because there is no future in this country. Kids who are going to graduate this year and feel that for the first generation, for the first time in 100 years, best to go abroad rather than try your luck here in Canada. This is what the legacy really means. And oil, energy, and energy affordability is really the harbinger of what you've done. It's the canary in the coal mine. The fact that we've assaulted it and that we've put all sorts of layers on it, the ridiculousness of the MOU, the Alberta government and Canadian government's MOU is simply ridiculous and defies economics and the realities of the marketplace. No one gives a damn about your stupid decarbonization. They don't give a damn about whether or not you've got a carbon credit that goes with it. They're not going to buy or not buy based on, they're going to buy it based on your availability, which we don't have, and the cost, which is about to be jeopardized.
Well, before I get to my next question, let this serve as a preamble, I guess, from Pierre Poilievre, who does seem to get it. I think he understands that we need a pipeline like right now, not in 10 years. He's been saying that for quite some time. But here he is essentially putting the ball in Prime Minister Carney's corner. And I'm sometimes critical of Pierre Poilievre. I'm not in any political party's pocket as the host of this show or as a journalist today. But I think he's got this right. And I know he's in a difficult position because those on the right are saying he's being co-opted at times by the Carney government. Those in the center are saying he needs to be more accommodating to the Carney government. So he's in a difficult position. But I think his latest declaration on why we need a pipeline is just realistic and obvious. And here he is.
Therefore, there is only one level of government with the constitutional authority to approve or reject the project, the federal government, and only one person with the legal authority to decide for that government under Bill C-5, and that is the Prime Minister himself. Only Mark Carney stands in the way. It's time for him to get out of the way. Getting out of the way is all the federal government needs to do to relaunch our entire resource sector and secure our economic sovereignty. Liberal anti-development laws and regulations are all still in place. High taxes on investment and energy, still there. We have among the slowest permitting in the entire world. These are all federal blockages. Getting them out of the way is the method and the means for retaking control of our economic sovereignty. I'm not here just to point fingers. I have a plan to make Canada stronger, self-reliant, and sovereign. In fact, I call it the Canadian Sovereignty Act.
So I think he's serious about this. My question to you, and I don't know how well you know or don't know Mark Carney. He didn't play much of a role in the Chrétien government, which you were most associated with. But do you think Mark Carney is really serious about this pipeline? Because every time the Conservatives ask a question about it in the House of Commons, the Environment Minister gets up and says how much it's going to benefit the environment, how much it's going to benefit climate change. And they never really want to talk about the fact they're enthusiastic about this pipeline. It's just like it's an attendant bit of business here. And this MOU is really about making sure Alberta pays more for the industrial carbon tax and that they stick it to the province on these environmental laws. But do you think Mark Carney's really serious about this? And if he wasn't, is he now, given what's happened in Venezuela?
Well, I don't know when Paul's had his conversion on the way to Damascus, but the reality is that I don't think his writings suggest from the past he's any different than he was back then, although he has done certain things that he knows because politically it doesn't work. But he has a caucus that still thinks it's 2015 and that, that the CO2 is somehow bringing the world to its knees and we're all going to, be flooded to death or starve to death or, wind up in massive deserts or whatever the case may be. All of this is just nonsense that I've heard and seen time and time and time again, going back to even my earlier days when I used to campaign with a guy who became the proverbial liberal candidate for one of the ridings next door to where I was many years ago. And everybody would recall our good friend Maurice Strong, who started this stuff off many, many years ago. So all the predictions have been incorrect. What we need to understand is that Carney doesn't want to do this because it goes against everything he's the future in this country. Kids who are
I found that very interesting, the fact that Dan McTeague used to campaign with Maurice Strong, who, of course, he is essentially saying is full of crap. Maurice Strong was Canada's leading advocate for fighting climate change years before it became a popular political force. And, of course, Maurice Strong, ironically, spent his remaining years in Beijing, China, in a secluded fortress and in complete hypocrisy, surrounded by all of these greenhouse gas emitting factories. So it's a very, very almost absurd end to Maurice Strong. But I had no idea Dan knew him so well. I just want to play a bit more.
Bond rating agencies are going to have to recognize that we're running out of excuses and we're running out of economic runway. With all that in mind, what it really means, I think, is for Mr. Carney doesn't want pipelines, but without them, the country is dead in the water. How the hell are you going to pay $14 billion in equalization to other provinces from Alberta and Saskatchewan, producing provinces, when you, as my grandfather would have said, you haven't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. But I really, what is the likelihood, in your opinion, of finding private sector support, or not even support is perhaps not exactly what we really mean to say, for the private sector to carry the responsibility of building this pipeline? Do you think that's going to happen, given the fact that there's going to be opposition to this pipeline? Maybe they can't stop it, but there will be some First Nations opposition. There's going to be eco freaks out there who will try to prevent it, perhaps even use terrorist methods to stop the construction of the pipeline. Do you think the private sector will get on board this if the Prime Minister says, okay, go? You think that's a likelihood?
No, because I don't think they trust the Canadian government. I think they the Canadian government deals in forked tongue and has the face of Janus when it comes down to these pipelines. One day they're in favor, the next day they're not. And so I think the sector itself will probably say, no, increasingly, as this country is seeing, this is a more disturbing trend. Everything here is done by, for, and with the consent and with the money of taxpayers through the government. Look at Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. You know as well as I do, David, $6 billion by Kinder Morgan to build a pipeline that wouldn't have cost Canadians a penny. Now, of course, $50 billion is on the books that you and I have to pay. And although Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is a great thing, the reality is it didn't have to be this way. And it sent an indelible message to the rest of the world. This is a country that is going to try to find every tool in the toolbox, to use John Horgan circa 2018, to block energy pipelines. And yet, when you consider it is our largest, most valuable export, we wonder why Canadians are flirting and playing and toying with disaster and allowing charlatans to come out and make these kind of comments and to have this idea that somehow you need unanimity and that the Aboriginals, the Indigenous people, have to exercise some form of veto. They need to be consulted, but they certainly don't have a veto. So all those things aside, I also look at the Indigenous groups in this country who've been denied the opportunity of taking advantage of as we say in French, the retombées, with the wealth, the benefits of pipeline construction in majority, but simply diverted by a handful of miscreants. And so I'm a utilitarian. the interest of the many comes well before the selfishness of a few. And if they are going to do that, I'd be the first one to endorse Mr. Poilievre, if he were to be Prime Minister, to throw these people in jail, which is...
Dan McTeague has just said he's going to endorse Pierre Poilievre and throw these detractors in jail. I love it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Wanted to share that with you, and you can watch the whole interview on Friday's show. It was Friday's show, and it's very thought-provoking. Very thought-provoking. Thank you for watching today, though. And I just want to show you the merchandise before we go.
Who cares?
Thank you for watching today, folks. We'll be back tomorrow, and keep me in your prayers right now. Difficult weekend. Thank you so much for being here. Bye for now. Continue to resolve, to resist. Bye. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible, as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Creighton, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.